Right, so we finished Ratio Dayan. So what we'll do is maybe just say the Kitzah to bring us back into the Indian before I begin the new chapter. So the new chapter is Ratio Ches, and the whole chapter deals with Indian of Reach. It's an interesting little point. Kitzur, v'hinei apsilas hanisho me'atzilas nofel abiyah v'nizbar shom. We saw it in the Biro Milmaila Lamata, the Biro of Toyu. The Avisha was Mavara, all of the Shirei Keglim of Toyu Milmaila Lamata, and the first. We saw the first Biro, we saw Barikas in the chapter prior to that one. We saw the first Biro was Atzilas, and then what wasn't able to be Niklal in Atzilas was Nofel Abiyah, and then it went from Bria to Yetzirah, from Yetzirah to Asiyah, and each time the Mufka, the highest Madrigas, which were shot to that particular Elam, were taken out, and then the Paselas Nofal. Further, Venisha, and at the end of the whole Indian, Elam Asiyah Hataktain, Nisha Noiga Debiyah. There was the Indian of Noiga, that was the Yika Vedas Ha'odam, the Yika Habira was Davki in Noiga. V'gam Habira Eina B'Shleimes, V'hu B'chines Ban. We saw that the Bira Adidei, the Vedas Adam Lamata, if it's even we'll say Al Pitan Vadas, then it's also not B'Shleimes, V'hu B'chines Ban. We saw that was in of the Shem Ban, but that's the Tziruf of the Shem Havaya, B'Gematria and Nun Beis, but that's tried to the Yerida of the Eros into a uniform Matthias Davke. Of Aveda, that's the Indian from Das Takten. We saw that Mitzad the Aveda al Pitam Vadas, it wasn't a bureau of the Netzutzes how they were in Noiga B'Shleimas. The Hagam Shezoa B'chira B'das, so we saw the Indian of Das Takten. Hadn't told the Maila that it was an Aveda Davke B'das, Uba HaKoda, and we saw that the Maila of Das is that you can have B'chira, the Davke in Das. Is the Yicha Bechira in Moyach HaDas. We call Mochim Yesh Bezet Ta'arivis Atzmai V'Hergish. Since it's connected with the Das, what Das is in Yone Hergish, and it's in the Indian of Das, which is coming not Bedel Das Takten, or Das Al Pi Tam Vadas. Therefore, there's an Indian of Hergish, and that Hergish is a feeling of the self. And therefore it's called Tarivas Atmi. Even though in the Aveda, in that level, it's not necessarily a Indian from Grobkai, Tarivas Atmi. But upon him, it's all connected with the Indian from Ban, what Ban is the Indian of Matzia. So that's in the Odom Gufa, Indian from Hergish of Matzia. Yochalia is Chas V'Shalom, a Bechira Laheva. I mean, the assumption is that probably it won't be Beifim Kozeh, because it's in even from Das, and an Aveda, which if we call it an Aveda, then that's a Taisha Dementia is making an evidence he's involved in something. But nonetheless, we bow that it's connected with Hergish Atzmei, and a feeling of his own self, and therefore there can always be the possibility that the Bechira will, the opposite will work in the other direction, because that's the possibility, that's the choice that in that level, which is still connected with the Indian of Eitz HaDas, Tei Vorah, Davke the Indian from Tei Vorah, Mitzad the Indian of Das, and therefore it's always possible that he might be Nikshal, and he might be Bechabe, Behevachatei. Mashenkin Das Elyon. We saw the Indian from Das Elyon is Davke Lamailami, Indian HaSeichel. Now that comes Lamailami Indian HaSfiras, and that's Mitzad the Etzem Devekis, and that's the Hakora in Etzemoyer in Sefer Islam. Ilami Oilamas, come over in Terror, the famous Maimar over there in Parsha Toilde, the Maimar von Das Elin, that comes in the even the Spheres being Musudorim, Begimul Kavim, but then the Ine von Das is Lomaila Mikol Spheres and Mamshich, the Ine von Ein safe into the Spheres Beklau. But as the Ine von Das is Machlif as a Keser Binyante. Yemot, we say that's a Hakora Dak in the air in Say, Lomaila Mi Medida Vagbora, and Mamela Mitzadet. That's not Shayat the Indian of Bechira in La Haifa. However, we saw that the Malachim there also Avidosim Pinas Das Taktin. The Tika Indian of the Malachim also is the Theraveda is Indian of Das Taktin, similar to the Aveda of Tam Badas and Das Taktin in the order. Just as on a higher Madrega. Omnom, and it suits to tell you who Shorshem Bechinas Tikboiras Achayas. Well, that was one of the Ike Hadgoshes, but there are Chiddush, you might say, that we saw in this whole Perik, that the Oiris to Toyu, they would have come mitzad the tremendous Maila of the Oiris of Toyu B'Shershom, the Hainu the Inu from Tikboiris, a tremendous Koyach, his Gabras in the Giloi, Davke. And that's well known, that's the Pneumius of Gvuras, how they are in Kedusha, that they're the Indian from Tikboir, therefore the word Gevura is from the Indian from Tikboir's Davke. So the Indian from the Oiros to Toihu, well, that what made them Lamaila Mea Kalim, and made it impossible for a Kalim to be Mekabel them, was really Mitad, the Tikboir's Achayas B'Shershom. In other words, it really those Oiros were Oiros, the Kedusha in a tremendously high, what you might call intensity or pace of Gilur. And because of that, it was impossible for the Oiris the Kalim, to be Makabel them. However, when the Nitzutes of those Oiris fell in the Shivei HaKalim, then Nasu Gevuris Koshes, that in Biyah, in fact, in Neged Biyah, then they become Gevuris Koshes. In other words, the Indian of Teikev in Olam Hazeh and the Indian of Teikev Hatayus for Chulu. The Indian Ba'abiru Nasa Reach Chazach Teikev Harotze. We saw that the whole Moshe of the Basmela, that she was Maria Tzike Hakadeda, and we saw that was a Reach Chazach. Well, that was indicative of the Birurim of the Netzutzes Tatayu. And by being mavarer them and bringing them back to their shoirish, then you're causing them initial rota. In other words, instead of nafila and yerida b'toik of godel, then once you bring it to them the bittul of chokmah, that's the Indian abira alidei adam, then you're causing them a gile kedusha or gile lakus in the nitzutes of the eres. Or then they, on the contrary, then they go back to the shoirish also begvura. But take if I take beirers, but that's even Rotze. So we see that Islam that works in two family. Mitzad the tik beirers by him, and therefore when they were, as it were, nikshal, when they weren't al tzaddik kedusha, they were neifel, but they fell also with a teikev and with a chosr. Like he said, they become gevures cautious here lamata. But when that's nefak into a inyan kedusha, well, then it becomes a rotzoi, a tremendous drive and a tremendous yesederus to go back into Elikus. So that's what we saw with the Maira, the Reya Chozot that comes out of the Biru. Well, that's a tremendous drive back into the Inyan of Kedusha from the Nafila of the Netzute. Bechinas Malchus Bebiyah, Shehi Bechinas Miyot V'Chalishus, He Richet Sicheke. The Dafke the Inyan of Malchus was mitzad the Inyan of the Yerida into Biyah, but the ultimate tachlis of that Yerida was to be married in the Netzutes, and the Yerida of Malchus into Biyah is of course of the tachlis Abira, as we've seen Barichas in this Hemshech and the Yadua on Forsam. And that's the Bas Melech and she was Maria to Tzichi HaKedera, the reach from the leftovers in the Kedera. But that's this reach chazak of the bira, the Netzutz is the Toyu, and therefore she wants that Davke, the Inyan from Malchus. But Inyan is the Inyan Abirurim, wants Davke that more than any other Inyan. Sha'ina Godel b'yesim mikol ha'gilui, because the Oinik Kaviochel Lamaila in the Hashova and in the Rotze, which is Naasali, they those Inyanim in their Hashova Lim L'Sher Shom, well that's Kaviochel Ma'ir Atainu Godel Lamaila, and that's Mizbatei in the Rote, not so much the Rote, but the Chukah on the part of the Bas Melech, the Inyan from Malchus, Davke for that Sug Haber Abirurim. Because Davke in them is Miskala the Tainuga Elyon. Zeo Reach Begodo, Zeo Reach Begodo. Well, that's what we saw when they get to the big day Chamulis of Esau, what they had in themselves, Inyan from Reach, Chazak. Well, that was mitzad the Inyan of the Yerida of the Eretz Datoya, which was nimtza in those begodim. Kasher, it was mizbareh. Then it became kois nois oyer. It turned into kois nois oyer, which they were malbish adam v'chaver liachrei achet. And then instead of being a Inyan from shayachs to Esau, bigay chamudes, but even from Yerida and Nafila, then they became like it was a protecting influence in the Inyan Kedusha, that there shouldn't be any more a Yerida or Yanika, a Chitania. For that that's the whole purpose of why Malchus Sokosof is Yeridin to be and like we saw Barichas in the previous show, that's the Tachlis of our Inyan, the Tachlis Kol HaYeridis Lefi Harizal, but that's the Tachlis Kol HaBriya, Kol HaYeridis, or element of the Gila of Malchus into Briya Yetzirah Vasiya is all for that Bira of those Netzutz Harayah in the Shivrei Kelim, the Teu Shenoflu, and bringing them back to Biruram, Veshelsham, Amiti, Zoshir Reach, Ubchinis Makif, Oyer Makif to Teu. That's what we see. Beklolis, that the Inyan from Reach is shaykh to the Makif Shebanefesh, and Lamaila is also Inyan from Makif, because Sokosof, the Oyeres of Teu were Makifim Legabi Atzilus. And therefore, when the Netzutzes return Lim Koirom, then they're Oyer Makif, Oyer Takif, Godel, and that's the Inyan of the Hamshochas Oyeres to Teu in the Kelim the Tikkun. And then we brought at the end, we saw that there was also a Inyan from Reach also in Tikkun. We brought the Moshe of the Hirich, the Yenoiga was Hirich Reach Begodo, Reach Levushaychu from the two Tanoim that they hadn't read Krishma, they don't still do it. And we said that's also a Reach, and that's Mitzad the Inyan from Mitzvahs in Oilams of Tikkun. But that's also from all the Netzutzes which have been Niklal into Tikkun through the Pula, the Mitzvah, which have caused an Aliyah, Ishkalas of Habi Netzutzes B'Teicha Tikkun. So when you do a Mitzvah, you already, like it's put down in certain places, that you already has a word nana to a certain extent from the Birurim, which have been already done with that mitzvah. Meshach Koladera Sakoidmim, Osmanim Akoidmim. But there's already a lot of that mitzvah has been achieved, and there's Kilo, all sorts of oitres of Inyonim, how they are mitzvah Tikkun, even though the actual mitzvah is done in Inyonim Shal Toihu. Or you're also Ma'ala, you're a little bit of Toihu, but you benefit, as it were, and you're able to be Mamshich, or those Inyonim which are already clued below in the Inyan from Tikkun. Like we see that I brought down in one of the very early Sikhs in Toshin Yupes, Toshin Gimel, but that's what we find, that there are certain Inyonim, Meshach HaToras, that they become easier, Kaviel, it's more Shayach to be Mavara than Bekalas, and then there are other Inyonim which become the Tafkid of that Doer more than those previous, because those previous Inyonim were already Nana from the Hamshachas with the previous Doers were Mamshich Alidei, the bureau of those Inyonim. So Yesh Lemer, that's a certain Shaykhus in that Inyan that there's already Kolo in the Inyan of Tikkun things which were anyway misbarah from the gevulis of Torah. Now we learn chapter Reach, and we're going to talk a lot about Reach. Yuvan, Masha Bekorbanis Nema, Reach Nichoyach La, Hashem Shahem Bechinas, Reach. So I asked the Kasha at the beginning of this drush that we were saying the whole time that the union of Korbanis was shot to Machol, the union of Lachmi Lishai, Ve'ilu Ketera said the union of Reach. So we asked the Kasha here that we find by Korbanis, it's also written Reach Nichoyach La Hashem. By the union of Korbanis, also the union of Reach. As if we're saying that the Ika Reach, that the Ketera is a Mahiv, there'll be in Reach Zel Reach. So that's now what we're going to be Miyashiv in this coming Inyan. So we see that the Korbanis also coil in themselves Reach. Liyosh ta Korbanis ein biruri anitzutzi shebenoiga. You can't alter the fact that one of the basic pu'ulas of all the Korbanis, particularly those Korbanis that they come al sa'in from Tikkun kol shehu, then their inyan is to be mavara the biruri anitzutzi shebenoiga. That's mavor b'kol hadroshim shehabahema dahabahema gashmiyas he tachas memshelas klipas noiga. In other words, she's under the rule of Tzvi of those, she's makabel, and her all chayas and all minyonim come from Davke, from the tzada heter, and heter is the from klipas noiga. In other words, the be'ika, it's klippa, be'ika to in from Helenberg, Esther al elakus kemu Perik Zayin, right in Tanya, that the ika in from noiga is the hergish of Olam Hazeh and the hergish of Noah b'Olam Hazeh. So ever the inyan the Korbanis burning a behema gashmis in the Eish Shalom Aila, or that's the inyan that alidation is refes, or that achiza in Klipas Noiga is burnt by Eish Shalom Aila, mizbarim anitzutza is v'nik klolim ba elakut. That the nitzutzas of the behema go out, and then niklal in the Eish Shalom Maila, and the Eish Shalom Maila, that's Gilei Elakut. Amamila, that causes an aliyah, Kimavua, the whole pier that alidei, what the netzutzis of the korban, oila, oilama, atu, then they cause am shocha into the union of Tikkun, and that's takadin and Reach Nichoyach, lihavaya, into the Shemavaya, which is Be'ika Atzilas, Be'ika Tikkun. There's this union of am shocha mitzad the biro in the korban. Of a sokas of that biro is referred to by the Torah as Reach. Reach Nichoyach lehavaya. So there was the Rebbe, we have to say that that's connected with the union from Reach will soon be Mavaya Ketzad. And so he said the Baveda in the Zman, Shein Beis HaMikdash Kayom Atechem Miyad, that'll be Nishtana Be'etem, and there'll be Beis HaMikdash Kain Kayom. Then Baveda Adam who inyan biru hanefesh habamiyas. Well, that's what he's mavara, meaning that he takes out the netzutzes from the nefesh habamiyas and he's madbik them and mila them into shorsham be'elakus. The nefesh habamiyas k'meish koso Adam ki yakriv mikem korban. The famous diuk that when a man brings a korban, then the ika is that it has to be mikem, he has to be machid the korban from himself, davke from the nefesh habamiyas. And Siddur, the famous title, the Alter Rebbe in the Kutei Torah, that Adam ki yakriv, Adam's referring to the Adam ha'elyon, that if the Eibishter will help you to come near yakriv, loshen hifil, he'll be makar of you, then mikem, that has to be the answer to that, has to be davke the only way that'll be lasting, and the only way it'll be able to be a kiyum, but nefesh Adam, is if he gives away mikem, as the famous expression has, rised up von sich a stick, he has to tear off for himself a piece, and burn that in the Eish Shalom Haila, Vayamot, the kiruv alidei the Adam ha'elyon has got a kiyum, and the famous Maimon in the Kutei Torah in Parsha Vayikra. Adafar, he said, Ula vare ula hapich in poil mamish in Aveda. It means to purify and even to be mahapik the midas tibium, the nefesh abamiyas le elo. Because, in other words, the nefesh tibium, the midas tibium, in Yonam, is to follow the inyan teva ha'olam. Well, that's the netiya of the nefesh abamiyas. Therefore, he tells that everything is alpi teva. You know, he says, what do you want from me? Yeah, the teva of the world is that you got to do kafeh, and that's only natural, it's only normal, what do you want, etc. The nefesh abamiyas, he's got a whole big, adequate menu of things that he says you have to have, because that's what the world says you have to have. That's normal and proper, balanced way to exist. That's the Indian, the nefesh abamiyas is in teva ha'olam, and he's nimshach achrei tibias inyanim. Therefore, in many places he's called nefesh ha'tibias, because that's etzem inyanim, etzem ta'anosei, and er tut das an mit der ganze Shitte, kiyadua. And what you got to do is take those midas atibiyim. In other words, the midas that you have, mitzadat teva of the nefesh abamiyas. In other words, what you might call your inborn midas, your how do they say, your natural, in inverted commas, tendencies, your natural midas, and you got to be mahapik them to elakus. In other words, that you have to make all the midas act, and they do things only mitzad, the tzivui of the Torah, and the inyanim is mitzad elakus. Then the midas themselves, being sokosof, as they are in the nefesh elokis, the midas are nimshachim from elakus shelamayla. Is alidei that your mavara, the midas of the nefesh abamiyas, then you not only be megalium the midas of your nefesh elokis, but you even moisif a certain koyach. This is one on the famous spear that Rav Tvois bekoyach, or Rav Tvois bekoyach shoyer when they come to arichas, that you megala the inyan from elakus into the midas atibiyim, and mamela they also become niklau. And not only then niklau, but they're even moisif into elakus. Well, that's what we find, that the ika inyan of the korban being korban, meaning what actually goes into the ishim on the mizbeach, what actually that gets offered on the mizbeach in the eish. We're talking about the eish shalamayla, and that is the chayliva v'dam. What the truth is, the ika hadam zoi nishpach ala mizbeach. Mamish in the eish is be ika the inyan of the chaylev, or however we see that the whole pu'ula of the korban and the whole what's called the hatoras, hakorban is dafke the inyan from the domim, the nesinas domim of the mizbeach. So we see that there's a inyan from nesinas dam, and then there's inyan of the etzem hakrovas chalovim or chaylev biha ishim. So he said that's two inyanim, dam and chaylev. So he said the resichas adomim, the nefesh abamiyas b'chamimas eish tatua, yishapek liyes between his rishpei eish ho ahava. I'm sorry, eish tatua, eish hataiva. So I had to clean my glasses first. So he said v'hainu the resichas adomim, the nefesh abamiyas, b'chamimas ha'eish ataiva yisapech liyes between his rishpei eish ho ahava. So taiva and ahava are from the same basic root word, as the well known. Taiva, instead of a vase, it's got a vav, and ahava is the same basic word, as is well known. Amamira the nefesh abamiyas inyoni is eish. Over that's a inyan from eish of ahava, how it's become taiva gashmiyas. In other words, that really the shorsh of that is in this mavur the tanugim alyonim. Over mitzad the nefila, the nefesh abamiyas, what inyoni is that he was neifel, through that inyan from nefila, So that Ava or Tainug, Amiti, how it is, Mitzad Elikus, becomes the Inyan from longing and Chuka to Inyonim Gashmiyim. In other words, that's how it is Mitzad the Nafila of those Netzutzes, and therefore it becomes a fire of a Hadikot, an Eish Zoh, not a Eish Amiti. So what you got to do is be mishapik that between us Rishpei Eish Ha'ava. And so it's 100. Alidei, when you bring the Eish, the Nefesh Elikish, then Eish, Eichla Eish, that's the Inyan of the Eish Shalamayla, that burns over and is mahapik through a lot of Gilui of Eish Shalamayla in your Nefesh, then you can cause the Inyan, the Taiva, to become Ava. And on the contrary, the Inyan of an Eish is a good thing. The Inyan of an Eish is a levitic zach, it's a thing which burns, and it brands. That's our aim. It just depends in what direction of Be'ezi Inyonim. It's Mishchamim, and it's how they call it, Seirei. Of Alidei, the Inyan of an Eish Shal Maila, would you bring Eish, which is Eichel and Mavatal, and Mahapik, that Eish of the Inyan of Le'umazeh, then you turn it into Eish Ha'av. Instead of Eisha Taiva, it becomes Eisha Amiti, of the root word Taiva becomes Ahava Yata Kodesh Baruch. V'achelev is an even tifere Inyan, and therefore the Inyan from Chelev goes mamish on the Mizbeach. Ahu Inyan Atainu, as the one on it. Chelev is the Inyan from a special type of the fats of the meat or the body of the korban. Then that's the Inyan of Tainu. As the one on it, the Inyan from fat indicates the Inyan of Ribuya Isangas in the Inyan of Achilas Abasa, as the one on by the Slav in the Torah. The whole Inyan of the old Torah brings the Parichas of the Pasha Balishko, that they were tremendously fat birds. And Ika Inyan was the Inyan from Chayev, how they called Shamnunias. They had hardly any basa as a Muvud in the Mufoshat Torah, and the old Torah brings it in Likutei Torah. Well, that Inyan from Chelev or Shamnunias is indicatory of the Inyan from Tanugi. In other words, we have to be machalik a bissel in the Inyan from Av of Taiva to the Inyan of Tainu. I have to say that Av is a midah shebelev, but either the Inyan from Tainu is more shot to a koech makif, Inyan from makifim. So we have to say that the Inyan from Eisha Taiva, or that can become the sapik, like Eisha Ava in Elikus, or that's Inyonim which come Lefi, the Hatzoah, as you might call it, the Nefesh Abami. So the Nefesh Abami is, how do you call it, put your menu like before, Inyan, and there's a certain acceptance on the part of the Odom. It's had the Inyan a certain, even Kamavu in Perik Vav, and Tanya, a certain Havana Vadova, a certain appreciation, a certain view, it's had the Chabad, the Nefesh Abami is, the Nefesh Asichli is, and Mamera, the mensch becomes Messiah, or it's not a Taisha Kol Mahusei is committed to the Inyan of Tanugim, or committed to the Inyan of Elam Hazeh. He can be, how they call it, Noitela Khan, Noitela Khan. Inyonim and Elikus can bring him to a Yisrael Sahava, and Inyonim and Nefesh Abamis can bring him the other way. Mamera, he's in a, how they call it,
limbo. He's in a limbo.
Yeah, he's in a, what's the expression? A quandary.
Quandary.
Yeah, not a quandary, a contradiction with two Inyonim. And if the Inyan, the Gila, the Eish Shalamayla, the Gila, the Eish Nefesh Elokis, is to bring him, that he'll take that Koach HaTaiva and he'll bring that, it'll always talk in a better language, it'll always tell him Inyonim of Elikus. And if there will ever be a Natir, like Aviezi Inyan, Gashmi, a Bekal, he'll be able to overcome it because of the tremendous Chayas which he's been Mo'era Mitad the Midas believe in Elikus. Although we have to say that the Inyan from Chelev, the Inyan from Tainu, that's what you might call in English commitment. At the mentions Legamri Avei to all the Inyonim from Tanugi Elam Hazeh, and das schleppt him with a makiv. In other words, he's all the time completely mavulbo in a way which he himself can't really, he can't really stop it or have any shit of it, or he's just committed to be verschleppt, as you might say, be etem. That's the inyan van Chaylev. Like it's well known, the makifim of Klippa drag a mention as how even that, after a while, even the seichel, and the Nefesh HaBamish doesn't have a great deal to say anymore. But the inyan van the makifim, Tainu, just got him into it. Now he said, what can I do? I just, this is my way, I can't help it. Was you willst to from here, Amamela, that's yesh lema, that's the inyan of the makifim of Tanugim Gashmi. So that was that's a tifere inyan, a deeper, more problematic inyan. He said that should be the inyan van Sreifes Achele. Al Gabi Amizbeach, das ist die Sabkulia is Tainugelo, ki, Basoge Viediel, Kis, Ule Hisanik, Allah, Avaye. So that was interessante inyan. But the Rebbe said that he had to be misapich, and as even there should be tainug eloki basoga v'yedia eloki so lishanik ala alavaya. What he should do is, hasoga v'yedia eloki, when he's verschleppt with makifim, the tanug elamazer, we come to Sarain, and then he said, he said, obedient from lishanik alavaya. Islam, that there's a remez obedience here. One of the ikka things that can stop the flow of the maki for tainug is davke the inyan of a soga v'yediyah. There's a tremendous tainug in a soga v'yediyah. If I mention verschleppt in tanugim, ulai that's a remez. One of the inyonim is to davke learn with him, inyonim which is shy to using the mind and davke stir up his ability to be musaira, the koiches of knowledge and atzoge betoich nafshe. And then all of a sudden he begins to see, because there's a tremendous tainug in muskalet. And the infant yediyah of muskal has got a lot to suggest to a person. That's like him for a whole other world. And so you can drag a person in, he becomes a Baal Yediyah V'Hasoga, and that's one of the ways in Zichalein to have a tremendous Gishmak in Limudah Torah, B'frat in Dvarim Pnimim V'Achmiyim, that's Megala a Tainug Gezah. And therefore you see that there's certain mention that once they get into learning, they become committed tremendously to not have seen it, therefore they have no rest or time. That there's a tremendous makif tzi, a mashiach in Yediyah V'Hasoga Elokis B'Kol Even Shehu. Whether it be nigla, whatever it be, once a mensch gets into it, it draws him in, and that's chaptim that he's all time looking up as Aref and as Ainian, because he's built in noch. Mitzad the tainug in the inyan van Yediyah V'Hasoga Elokis. The Rebbe's maramas that maybe that's one of the ways to pull in a Baal Tainug, is to get him involved in learning certain inyonim and to make him have a koch and let him, on the contrary, let him kochen in inyonim van Hasoga Elokus, and eventually lisanig alavaya, that'll eventually bring him that all these Tainug will be dafki in inyonim van Elokus. If you correct him the right way, you have to guide him in the right oifen. He shouldn't just become a ganze yesh mitzad his asoga. The reason was that the ultimate kavanah of his other toy. So the toyim sind the two of tam von tainu in asoga sapele. This is it's a very interesting formula. Schlepp as I mentioned, give him in, gradually pull him in to inyonim.
Maybe that's
something like Olai, what the Alter Rebbe brings in Geras HaTshuva, or we just started in the Chittas. But the Alter Rebbe brings out that at the inyan van Limud HaTorah, that's a tikkun to Yana Cheit, and the ganze this, because that's a inyan van Moyach. It's dafke alidei the Moyach is he can be mataki. Dafke die Ine von Moyach ich bin mit Tachin. Und jener Chet ist verbunden mit Ine von Taino. Es ist verbunden mit Taino Chazach, Omok, Chulu. Es der Tikkun, Dafke Ine von Limoda. Dafke die Ine von Limoda. What he's already talking about there, Gemar Kol Ha'inyan. Began in Perek Zayin with Ine von Tshuvat HaTorah. Aber en Chanami, weißt du, there's a certain Inyan in Hasoge, Yediyas HaTorah, which is Asui, to be madbik, to mention, to be matakinim, that his koach hataynu can be nimshach into inyonim elyonim. אז ich kommt euch lafise, יש למה בפנימיס הטובה, das was steht in Geras HaTshuva, דווקא in der Moyach, dort kann stecken die Emse Inyan oder Tikko, also. Auch upon him.
That ta'anug dafka comes from the Moach. That ta'anug dafka comes from the Moach.
No, I wouldn't say it comes from the Moyach. No, Taino doesn't come from the Moyach. Taino comes from the Etzem even higher than Rotzen. Taino is a very Inyan Pnimi, but it's mislabish and it's misgale alidei the Moyach, alidei Yediyah v'Atzogeh. And that's what we say, that the Gilui Atika is dafka Bina. I say that the Eivishter Weggestalt. That dafke when there's a koach of the mensch becomes involved. What does is Bina? Dafke there you have the Gilui Shleimus HaOine. On the contrary, dort wird niskala the Shleimus HaTainu. And the Derech Efsher, the koach HaSfora, one can say that that's a Chesed Elin from the Meivishten. Where does he give you the Hechster Giluim? Where does he give you? Dafke when you become involved. Dafke when you get into it with your Inyan. And that's a Tachlis in Elikus Kufa. The Eibishter wants that the man should be part of it, not just with the bittel from Chochmah. Over there he gives, he doesn't give Begoloi. Once you get it into Bina and you're koching with your own Hasoga, oh, that's where he comes. Mit der ganze Schleimus of the Eter. It's a Pille Nifla.
Is that a parish of Zion b'Mishpat Pada? Is that one of the parishim in Zion?
Yeah, ein noch aname, because the Alter Rebbe brings it, Mishpat, the von Hilchus Kadmaisa, the von Lacha, Limud HaTorah, ein noch aname, Zion b'Mishpat, and Zion is a Pnimis HaNefesh, the von Oinim. Dafke the Pedia is dafke so in von Limud HaTorah, ein noch aname. Or al Chaponim Shoveya, even Tiffer, that's where the infant stock. Over Enchanam, yeah, Yafet. Enchanam, it's got definitely has a shaykhs. Yeah. And if says the Rebbe, yeah, the Ike, Inyan, Hakobonis, and that's even in the Geras HaTshuva. Geras HaTshuva is always at this time of the year, yeah. At the infant Tzion B'Mishpat, yeah, Tipodei, and that's Perek Tes, Perek Yud. They're all, ultimately, it all Tutzchon and leading from Limud HaTorah. Ve'ike Inyan HaKobonis, says the Rebbe, even though we've got up in the very high Birudim over the Kobonis, Biz the Inyan and Taino Gelaki. He said, Ike Inyan HaKobonis, who beginners is Kafya Levad. Liyis, yeah, the Avedas HaKobonis, but Derech Klal, he Avedas Alpitanva, that must be the previous Inyanim, that the Ike Inyan for Kobonis Sofkosov is connected with the Inyan from Tanva, Ta'am Vodah. Where do we see that? In Be'izi Inyan do we see that? We'll see as we go along. First of all, is in van Achila. What Achila is beklal connected with the Inyan van Oiros Pinimim. However, said the Rebbe, we see, V'zesh Omer Razal, the Gemara Masechta Yuma, what it brings, that Afal Pi, She'eish Yored Mil Maila, Mikol Mokim Mitzvah Lahovi Mina, Eish Mina, Hedioit Shenema, V'yalchu b'nei Aaron Eish ala Mizbeah. So even though the Gemara and the Mishnah Mazvur there, that the Eish came down Mumayla, and that was the Korban is written in the Zohar, that the Arya the Ochil Korban, and he was talking at sort of an Arya Bisman Beis HaMikdash, or Chaponim Bismani Musuyomim, in the Bate Mikdash, it was a even Eish. Beturas Ariyeh, and that was the Inyan that ate the Korban. Afal Pikain, Mitzvah Lahovi Minha, a Hedyoit. It was the Inyan of an Hedyoit, was Koinim that it wasn't still mentioned, no meaning Mitzad the Odom, not Eloki, no Mitzad the Odom, and Hedyoit is indicatory of his Koyak, Kamoshu, Zain is a, Lefi Pshitas Koichaiso, or that's in van Hedjeit. Yeah, and so you see too, the Chaloiti of Bilch's Hedjeit, Kalas Lefonecha, Dafki into Brocha, the Amshocha, into Inyanim van Hedjeit, they shouldn't be Kalas Lefon. Yeah, Lefonecha, meaning that the Adam, Kamoisha, who in his Koichais, he's got to bring what he can. That's the Inyan of the Aveda al Pitan Vadas in the Korbanos, meaning that not that the whole Inyan, the Klawless Inyan of Korbanos, Lalo Yitzim in a Klaw, is only the Inyan of Pitan Vadas. So we see that the whole, what you might call the whole Yesod and the whole fundament is Davki the Inyan of Eish Mina Ahed, Orcho Benaran Eish Ala Mizbech. You've got to light your own fire. It has to be your own Inyan, like we saw, that it has to come Davke through your own effort to change the Eish and to bring your Eish on the Mizbech to Hainu to be Mahapach, the Eish of your Nefesh Abami. Yeah. And then, Alidei Seh, there's also Nimshot the Eish Lamaila, and that's the Inyan of the immediate Inyan of Rishofeya, Rishpei Eish, that Shalheves Yudkei, Kemavur dot in the Psukim in Shir Shirim. Well, then there's Nimshot the Eish Shalamayla, aber von dem ist manchmal that the Ike HaKrova of the Korban is connected auch upon him with the Avedish Al Pitan Vadas. Yeah, so well, was it even Hedjeit? The Einu Prin is Ava, Boali Dea is born, and it's not the Ava Shalamayla, your Ava, what you can produce, the Minifin Hedjeit. Yeah, but Gam Hoi Shalamayla, says the Rebbe, Ein Ze Beginnes Eish Havaya. Even that Eish Shalamayla, which comes down by the Korbanos, is not the immediate Inyan from Eish Havaya, or Kamesha Kosa Lo Be Eish Havaya. It's written Lo Be Eish Havaya. We see that Ishei Reach Nechoyach Lavai, there is a Eish Shalamayla. It's written in the Gemara, Eish Shalamayla. So therefore, says the Rebbe does state in the Zohar that there are two different types of there's two different types of Eish that we're going to see in a minute. Tahainu, that there's a Inyan from Loi Ba'eish Havaya, and then later there is a Inyan from Eish Havaya. So that was even though that's a Eish Milmaila, it's not Mamish the Eish Havaya. That Inyan occurred by Eliyahu when he was in the cave and he heard the rash and everything, and it said, V'hinei rash v'loi b'rash havaya v'hinei ruach, and we state that v'loi b'ruach havaya v'hinei eish v'loi b'eish havaya ki'im koil demama shomaiti koil demama dako shoma bo havaya, and it's written in the Zohar Toman ka'osi malka. That's Taki what the immediate gile of Elikus is, Taki in the koil demama Taki in the meaning from beetle from the Adam Mikoma, who say Mikol Vakoil. I hear, however, what's still a Indian from his bonus, and it's his Aveda, his Aish, what he's bought, and therefore that Aish is only a relative Aish, it's not Mamish Aish Avaya, Kil, in Azar Aish is Loibe Aish Avaya. Akamesh Kosim Okimacha, Shia is bonus, Peshoyer Shumaki Anevisha, Bamir. That's one on the famous beer in the Drushim. But I get to the Bilchas Krishma, the whole Inyan of the Shorosh and Nefesh Abami is how he is in the Vanim, B'chayis HaKodesh L'mayla, and in the whole Proti Al-Shenis Arayah and Bilchas Krishma. But after there we come to the Shorosh of the Mokia of the Nefesh Abami, yes, and we show the Nefesh Abami Silamata how it looks, his Shorosh of Mokia L'mayla, and that causes him to fall somewhat from his takeoff, if not legamre, well, you're not mamish mahapachim with that, but you're causing him a kilo, what you might call a certain bush, a certain year of basis inside the Nefesh Abami is, that he sees his shores, and look where he's holding. Yeah, the fact that causes in him a certain, at least that he's no longer mavalbo, as they state in certain drushim, that if you want to bring in a much higher ava now, he's not going to stand in the way of a lav davki that he's been mishapik be'etzem mahusay. So therefore he said, b'shor shomach nefesh abam, shekemoy ba'avedus hamalachim u'kahai gavna, shezehu ha'misayeya ba'abitl the nefesh abam. It assists in the nefesh abam, but not it is the immediate the bittel at the nefesh abamiyes. The kol zeh hu b'chinas iskafiyele leva. Like I once heard from Chosher to tell to myself once, I think it was in some time I heard it. And he sort of learned out of them, from the Maisa, he learned out a similar maskana to this idea, B'tel Balabatish, that once a young man was over in the east side, it was in the early years, after the Matoyim, and there was still a bit of a sort of a Matthias of the east side, you know, all the old Yiddish shops and Yiddish Geschäften over there. So he came into a shop that was run by a Yid. He suggested he put on tefillin, and so then he said, telling him, well, would you like a cup of tea? I can prepare, I got a kettle out the back there, I can make a cup of tea. So he said, okay, and he went behind the curtain, and there's a little sort of, you know, kitchen there with a chainik and some cups and some coffee and some tea, and alongside it is this very, very big picture of, maybe it was even a painting, not a chilum, of a rov in the Amalek Sot Rabbonim, you know, score of edel ponim, a gettliche ponim, mit so ein alter Streimel, so ein Kopf, so ein Korb, so ein speziellen Bild, hanging there in this little kitchen behind the curtain, you know. So the young man says to this Yidden, he says, you know, me, hi, who is this, you know? He said, well, this is my alter Zayde. He said, this is my alter Zayde. He said, given a rov, or you know, good to Yid, in a certain place in Poland or Galicia, I didn't picture her. And I said, that's it, that's how he looked, that's how he said. So they said, that's a edel tzura, you know, very edel tzura. He said, you're telling me, he said, if I say, he said, every now and then, he said, here I am over on the east side. He said, all schlechte Sachen coming around, all the goyim, ich weiß das bei mir in the Geschäft. He said, what do you think holds me? He said, was hält mir? Ich bleibe auf, ob ich kein ein bisschen Jid, und ich werde nicht noch die alle Unionen, sondern ich bleibe, you know, Jid. He said, I'm a Shem Shabbos. I said, he was made in Schwach, you know. What he is, he said, I come around and I kick from one to deep in them Zach. He said, I look, he said, auf mein Schirr, from one to take come. He said, come from dort, no. He said, I can't possibly be like the, you know, like the street. He said, Connors, as he's saying, ich nehme sich doch von dort, I can't possibly. So he said, das was steht im Citizen. That if you was bleeding in the shore, so that's where I come from. I can't really be. He becomes at least bittul in the sense that he's not mavalvo anymore. Therefore, the Rebbe uses the lotion that's misayeh bebittul anefesh avam. So I thought it was a dover nechman. It's mizeh gefallen geworden. So, but yesh leimer that works with a lot of Yidden, you know, when they know where they came from. It's sort of say a starke, how do you call it, misiyuye behabitl of the nefesh habamiyes. The kol zeh al chaponim hu b'chinas is kafiyele lava rak. He said, imam, that's your way to sabeinu, how do you call it, the way to fun, yeah, anoshim keh, yeah, elkeinu. However, the Rebbe rak ba'avedas tzadikim, the ikar v'yidotzom hu mitzad neshama, u'v'chein ha'eish shelehem hu eish havaya, not loy ba'eish havaya, no, b'zeh is taka eish havaya. V'chamesh koseh b'tikkunei Yisrael, ish eish b'ish eish. There's one eish which we say about it, loy ba'eish havaya, and then there's another eish amiti. What is it taka the eish Havaya? In other words, not a eish milmaila which is nimshach after your eish ahedia. No, there's a miti signifying eish which comes directly from the Shem Havaya bi'atzmai. And if does what nimshach, then everything becomes, not only just nisraf, and everything becomes nichlal in the eish. Arizeh v'chinas yishapcha mamish shenefak mohus hanefesh habamiyes v'nichlal be'ela. Well, that's where we find that there's different inyonim in Eish. That sometimes Eish is soirev, and how do you call it? It's machale of it's not necessarily mahapik. And then sometimes we say that the infination, the shotzi, and how do you call it? It completely destroys, and it's mahapik the other Matthias to another Matthias altogether. Amamela said the Rebbe, that's two Eifanim in Amitias Aveda, or Mitad Eilu Sheshorish Nishmozim is Shach to be out, that's a Bainanim, or Al Chaponim Nishomas Gevoyas, what they're the Inim from Tzadikei Emes. Of Al Chaponim, we see from that the Ike of the Korbanis is a Eish Shalamata, and that's Mamshik Eish Shalamala Fierach the Aveda of the Adam. Mitad his Hisayrus, Im Kain, it's a Inif Tamba, Das Sokoso. Even as we're going to see, there is Nimshach and there are Makiv. But the Makiv is Lefi Oiven of the Hisayrus Mitad the Pnimi. So who said the Rebbe Deshak Korbanis, him Bchinas Reyach, Bchinas Abiro, the Nefesh Abamis, the Nefesh Abami, the Noig, I'm sorry, Biro, the Noig, the Nefesh Abamis. Umagia beginners maki. If we've already come to that, says the Rebbe Tzofko, the Indian is to be soirev, and to be through that mavara or makar of the nefesh abami is telakuz. Then Tzofko, we have to say that the Indian the atam v'das, and the Indian of the korbanis in avedus adam afil is al pitam v'das is connected with a bir. Because if you're going to be makar of the nefesh abamish telekus, then the kavanah is that he becomes botel al choponim, bechinas bitul hayesh to the inen of elikus. Amamela, that's enough to be malad in the tutzes, or at least al choponim to begin their aliyah. As the one we had earlier, that there's a bir habeish le'achrim izeh, and that's al idei avodah nailish yiseh, or al choponim through inim from chesed elyon. Upon him in that, or even it's already the beginning of the birah. So there was a Rebbe, if it's already shaited in from birah, the nefesh abami is, then so of course it must reach, it must also be magia and mo'ir ainishal makif. Because like we saw, the reyach is so of makif, and we saw that the inim from toihu, those oirs go back to their shoirish, and their shoirish is in Toyu, and Chokosof Toyu is Makif Legabi Bia. Omnum said the Rebbe Ike in an Areach Shabo. I'm sorry. Omnum said the Rebbe Ike in an Areach Shabo Midova Choref Chozok on Meishe Vesa Nefesh, who Reach Kiter Tavke. In other words, that's Take Areach, it's a Inifa Makif, but that's a Makif we're going to see how it's still Shayak to Inifa Pnimi. Ve'ilu the ayamasi Indian from Makiv, the Ike Indian of Reach. Well, we saw that comes Davke from Adora Chorif, a Chozik, like we were Masbir, and we said that was also the Indian from Biro Netzutis to Toyu. Then we have to say that there's another Oifen, another Shleimus in the Indian of the Biro, and the Netzutis, and that's Davke, Alidei, the Indian of Keteres Davke. So we're going to see the kilo, we're getting now into two different levels in the Indian of the Bira. What that itself will need a careful examination, a careful chiluk bein zeh, and we'll see about that later as we go on. We'll see to be masakim the Indian. However, said the Rebbe, the mitish Indian of the Reach, well, we saw that Davke comes from Adova Hafochi, Adova which is already no longer a normal thing that gives Reach, not Adova Kilu, B'tzike HaGedel, it's Adova which is Chorif, V'heifach L'choyre Inyan Atam, V'atoyem Be'etem, and nonetheless we saw Davke that causes a Reach Chazok, and that's Meishiv Esa Nefesh. Now we're going to see that the Pshat in Meishiv Esa Nefesh is that it reaches, just like Reach B'pashtas, reaches into the Etzem Nefesh if it's B'prinas Histalkes, it can bring the bench back from his Alphas. Mashing Achila doesn't do that, as we pointed out. So we're going to see that there's an Indian in the Reach, well, that's connected with Keteres, which reaches the Etzem Nefesh. In other words, another level in a form of Bira, another type of Bira, which has got to do with the Inyone Nefesh, Adel Maila Mia Koiches Agluim. The Hina Efresh bein Reach to HaKorbanis, Lo Reach HaKteres, Hu Kemo Efresh bein Reach Sheba Maichel, Lo Reach HaBesomim, She'in Adova HaNechal. Pirush, that in a Indian Shel Maichel, there's also a Reach. In other words, that poshet a Michael, if it's misbashel, but even a Ra'ui also gives off a reach. It has a certain reach, and there's a certain taste and gishmak in that reach, which is like a form of the effect of the achil. It's mishaper and brings, as it were, a kiruv of the adam to the inyan ha-Michael through the inyan of the reach. Ve'ila the inyan of reach be'etzem, that's a reach shel be'samim. It's well known that in etzem ha-reach it's a door she'aneshama nenes mena v'lo yago. There is a certain reach which is yashak to achila, even though it's not mamish achila, or it's shayach and it's mitzad ayin shel achila. And if said the Rebbe, hadaharei akorbanos ein b'chinas lechem. A meat is in the akorbanos is Michael, like we taught earlier, and like we've been mafarish b'roi v'amakim. So Moshe Kosov es korbani lachmi. We see that the meat is in from korban to the Eibishter is mitzad lechem. The pulas a lechem hu rak lechazik achayis pnimi levad. We see that when does Michael help you, not when your chayes is bechinas istauchus mimcho, but dafke when you're mutash and you're nechlash, mitad heder achila, or mitad other inyonim, and when you eat, and that causes a chizuk in the chayes, but it's a chizuk in the chayes which was below here there in the guf, ta'ainu, l'chazik ha-chayes ha-pnimi levad. And we saw that the Indian from Raya can even call back ha'is chachas with the chayes altogether. Rak, shebazeh yesh gam kein toisefes chayes, shemischazik bazeh koichoi b'chinas toisefes oil. He said, in that gufa, there's two efanim. There's an Indian from ischachas, I'm sorry, an Indian from chizuk, the awakening of the koiches pinimim, which comes mitad the Michael biatzmai. Then there's a reach in the Michael, and that reach in the Michael that gives a toisefes in the, like we say that when the mensch is, when he has the Michael, it's got a reach toiv, then that's kilo mashpia on the whole atzlocha of the achila. And he feels better from it. So the Rebbe said that's an inen in pnimis adova also, because that gives a toisefes chayesh shemischazik bezeh koichoi b'chinas toisefes oil. V'hainu mipnei shanim shechachayes mim koiroi me'oya makiv shalidizeh mitoisef koichoi. In other words, that's a reach sheba Michael, and that comes dafke from a oil makiv, but it's a oiven of a oil makiv which is korev el apnimi, and therefore he's moisef, and he calls that toisefes in the inen of the oil pnimi. V'zehu alidei a reach sheba Michael shemagia be'oil makiv. Yeah, it's well known, but so chamra v'reicha pichin. Well, that's what Rava said. The Gemara Masechta Yuma brings it. Rava said that wine and reich, the not said loshem reichoni. The Alamon Siddur state chamra v'reicha, but the Gemara state reichoni. Upon him things which are are made to smell. Adequate perfumes, good not as all good as Sachen. They are. They were what? State in the Gemara, pichuni, as they state, pichun or pichin, they made us clever. In other words, I became matzliach in my learning through the Indian from Chamra v'reicha. That's a kavanah dot in the Gemara. And the interesting is the Gemara brings it dot by Hemshech to the Chumrah, what the Gemara is ma'era, but they get to drinking wine and how shikras is a dover magunim with the whole Indian. So it brings over there that a teach in certain psukim that you can teach the psukim almost as a war, or hear them having a mashmois in two directions. And therefore, when they get to Yayin, says the Gemara that Zocha, if the mensch is Zeicha, and he drinks wine in the right way, then Yishmach Havaya Mashu Kazeh, then on the contrary, it's a good thing, and then he can be Moisef in Kedusha Mitzad Zeh. Zocha, he wasn't Zeicha, then Cholila, there can be a tremendous nafila alidei diinim from yayin, and bring to Gemara v'hainu the Omar Rava. That's what Rava said. Yeah, that chamra v'reichani pichuni or pichin. Yeah, meaning that he was Zocher. The Gemara just assumes that Rava, being Rava, that he was Zocher. And if Dafki Alidei, a person like Rava, was able to beat it, these inyonim were Moshe for tremendous inyan in Kedusha. And if I'm not mistaken, one of the Havonas in that Gemara is that even Chamra has got a certain shaykhs to the inyan from Reach. In other words, that the certain wines, that they have a tremendously powerful Reach, and that reach is moisif in the, what you might call the perfection and the yeilus of the effect of those wines. And that's why he chose Dafki those two inyonim, Chamra Reichoni, the Ika being according to that pshat. And the way the Rebbe brings it here as being nogeh to the inyan from Reach, then it would seem that it's nogeh to the inyan from Reach, even the Chamra. Chamra v'reicha pichin shemetesef his chakmas alidei zeh v'hu alidei hareach. In other words, we're talking about a zay inyan of reach, which is makif, but a makif which is moisif in the pnimi. His korev el pnimi inyoni is to be moisif atoisvis in the etzem inyan of what Michael does. What does Michael do? It affects the chizchazkis of a korev which is belavachi nimta. And the inyan from Reach in this inyan is moisif in that a taste of his dakis and a taste of his atzlocha v'chulu. U'alidei the inyan from Reach. Ach ma shemagia ba'amakiv shebenefesh u'ba'amakiv ashayach el hapnimi. Well, that inyan from Reach, how it is mitad Reach v'chamra with all those all inyanim, well, that reaches as our amakiv, which is anyway shayach to the pnimi lavad. It's not that the pshat that the makif mamish comes begolui bechol chaye adam kiim masha moisif v'chayes b'ya pnimi v'ay masha nizbura perikuf ayinal. What over there the Rebbe was mas with our Indian bariches in avoda alidei there's a makif hakorev. What is mamshich a makif? What ike inyan is to be poil in the inana. Apnimis of lo zui amitis gile hamachif, shebenefesh. So that was the Rebbe. We have to say that kemoi keinu adugma lamayla the reach hakobonis ma b'chinas makif elyoin ein nochanami. Afilo that b'china kilo yodam. Who as is well known. That the chayes by fanim amale the merkova elyoin into the madrega from. Ki lo yodam even higher than Atzilus, but higher than Atzilus is already the inyan from Akiv. V'hainu alidei hareach the biruri in the tzutzit. Eino chanami. That's also from a reach which is connected with biruri and tzutzit. Alidei zeh mitoisef oya v'chayes b'chinas odama elyoin. Von deswegen said the Rebbe, Eina oya machiv mea begilui. Elke mashe mitoisef bi'era pnimi. That there's an extra nasinas koyach and an arousal in the inyan of the pnimi mitzad the inyan from the makif, kipshuta like the inyan of the reach is moisif adakis and atzlocha in the effect of the Michael v'chulu. Omame, well, if he said is that we haven't yet got to the amitis inyan from gilui hamakif benefesh kegilui, because the inyan from makif mitzad atzmei is in a state of Ishtauchus or lo b'chinas gilui. Imamir yesh b'zeh kama ifanim. But there's a inyan from gilui which is not really gilui hamakif mamish, but the hakoras hamakif in or the ashpoa or the makif in the penimi. And we're going to see that the mitis inyan of ketoides and the inyan from reach haboisim b'pashtas is gilui hamakif mamish. We'll see that that's another form of Aveda, but that's a gilui mitzad the koiches of the etzem and nefesh alei alamayla means slapses in the klei aguf, or lamayla, just like we saw the inyan from Das Elin, or the inyan from the Akora in Afro Pikain. We're going to go further and say in that guf there's two inyanim, because there's a keteris which was in the Heichal, a little bit of Hilchas Beis Bechira. There's a keteris which is in the Heichal, and then there's a keteris of Yom Kippurim. But inyanim was Tafki in the Kodesh Kedoshim, and it was Moira, the whole of the Schachasukim and the Gan Tzariches, but that's a Makif Elin, Odioter Vidam, the Keter Shebahechal. We're going to see that that's the ultimate Shleimus. So the Makif, but that's the meaning for Makif Ha'atzmi, for Makif Ha'pnimi, Mamish, how it is, the Etzem Ishchabris of the Neshama Beguf, or Odioter, Afil Lamayla was there. The Gilead, the Etzem and Neshama, how it's even Lamayla Ishchabris Beguf. What we'll see about that, hopefully already together in the Beis HaMikdash, no longer learning about these inyanim, mitei chasefer, and seeing them b'pearl mamish and b'gola and kidua, the words in the Divrei Admor Hazokim in Parsha Pinchas, where the Alter Rebbe is mavayar over there, Marich. The L'chera, we just spoke about the Avedas Atfila, Pisman Agolas, the Biro of the Nefesh HaBamis. L'chera, that's a very high inyan. Yeah, and it can get mamish into a very dachastik and hoicha madregas, and the inyan from Tfila is a very high Aveda, and that's everywhere. You don't need the whole inyan from Davki Beis HaMikdash, and Davki B'mokim Ploini, Alidei Koyim, and the Gant. You remember, what's it the inyan where we need Davki the Beis HaMikdash to Rik L'chera? I mean, it's contained, he's got the inyan from Avedas Atfila, below he is lot at Kolam Island. So the Alter Rebbe says that the ultimate shleimus of the Beis HaMikdash is that the highest inyonim are nirim davki begashmi so'ilam. Davki lamata begashmi so'ilam. Those are the ultimate tachlis. And when it's a eish, Shalamayla was brent a koben begashmis be'enei bosa in the olam. This is a mitis in of Dira B'Taktoinim. Well, they stay talking. And those are echa with the other inyonim, even though Einochanami, there might be certain inyonim in the Vedas Atfila where the Yonam was Magia for Madrega Shalom is Galim in that Eish Shalom Alam is Baya. Avav became that's the Tachlis, Kola inyonim. And it's very interesting. I saw a Loshan like that from the Friedrich Rebbe, but I get to a very fascinating inyan. And it's put down the whole story in the Zohar Kodesh, Rav Amenei Saba, Eliyahu, no, he used to come to learn with the Idur, with Rashbi and all the Chaverim. Once he didn't come with the Nishkisen. So he asked Eliyahu, no, next time, why didn't you come to the learning last time? Eliyahu, no, he said he had to go and save Rav Amenei. He had to go and save Rav Amenei Saba. And so to Rav Amenei Saba, he had to be Mislavish in a goof. Since he was over there, he can't be over here. The whole Indian wants a neshama, even a neshama from Eliyahu, and always in a good, there's a certain hagdora. It's limited, certainly, somewhat to that particular group. So Friedrich Rebbe is medayik in a mind. Friedrich Rebbe, in Emes I found it in Ein Beis. The Rebbe Hashem said, but the Friedrich Rebbe is marek in a yoter. And he said, Sof Eliyahu, I know he goes off all the prison. If he goes all the prison, it's only a nitzer 2 minutes. Nish mamish slapshes beguf. So he can be over there, and he can be over. He could have been there but a goof, and he still could have come to the Indra. Was it the Bayat? So the Friedrich Rebbe said, no, the whole deal, the ganze deal considers in that sipur is that whenever Eliyahu came to the Indra, he also came in a goof. And he says, why? He said a fascinating thing. He said because the whole inyan from Rashbi was to be mamshik, the highest inyanim in Pnimis Atira b'zeh ha'olam. He said b'zeh tachlis kol achsidus she'iyeh is galas kol inyanim dafki b'zeh ha'olam. And he said therefore whenever Eliyahu came to learn with the Rashbi, he came dafki nagu nishno lekvod Rashbi. He came to quite the Indian that whenever he comes to Rashbi, he has to come in a goof, and he had to go in a goof to say Rav Amenei Saba. It can't be in 2 goofs at one. No, even though he can't. 2 goofs at one go, he can't. He stayed. Oh, you see how the Friedrich Rebbe tights the slaves. He tights it to such a beauty. Now, he doesn't leave you to understand it. It tights the slaves. And then he said that's Tatlis Kol Achsidus, Kol Pnimis Atira, Lahamshik is Kol Inyonu Lamata Mata, B'Teik Zecha, Oilam. So I think that's a good way to pause, isn't it? Nee, we zoals bestochen koeien, dat is ook nog een keini hier. That's say want Moshe. No. If she had Moshe, he'll say Chiam Melech Moshe. What's wrong with you? If he had the name of Rabbeinu Melech Moshe,